Hello, hi again. So I decided to come back and talk a little bit more about the witchy aspects of Maleficent, as I did not want to spend quite so much time of the review for the standard part talking about all of these things, as I did not want to bore those who are not interested in those aspects of this movie. But for those who are interested in a more witchy perspective, we're going to get into that here. Now, I am Kamilah. I am operator of the Bliss Institute, so I talk about all things astrology, all things witchy, all things tarot, oracle cards. Not so much into the angel things, but really love shadow work, the underworld, goddesses of life and death, and all of that good stuff. So let's get into some of the witchy things about Maleficent. First of all, she's a dark fairy. I have a slight knowledge of fairy folklore. I am not as well versed in them as I am in some of my other goddesses that I work more closely with, but I really appreciated the way that it showed a bit of their understanding and use of fairies. I would very much so like to see someone speak about their portrayal of fairies, as this was supposed to be set in the moors in this location, and how they relate together, whether that is a very accurate or inaccurate portrayal as per the culture of those lands. I particularly was obsessed. So I had honestly forgotten that the dragon was in the animated Disney film Maleficent or Sleeping Beauty. Because I was like, someone said, "Oh, it's a throwback and a call to," and I was like, "Of what?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, the dragon." So spoilers all around. So if you haven't seen the film, and you want to be surprised by the film, you might want to click off for this part because I'm going to get into some spoiler territory. But they tell the lore of Maleficent and where she came from, as she is rescued after they try to kill her when she goes to the dinner with Prince Philip and Aurora, and Queen Ingrid is acting a fool, and the king is taken down by what they believe to be a curse. She attempts to run away. She is shot down from the sky, and then she is rescued by another winged being who looks just like her. And so we see her being carried away, and then we find that really beautiful scene of her waking up in the nest, and there's that gorgeous contrast between the light and the dark and the white and the black of the feathers in the nest, and all the black that she has. Her hair is down, her makeup is very bare with the still that oh, it's just beautiful. And her lines, the lines are just fabulous. And then so she comes out and she's in this nest, and we see her moving through here, and we see this huge drop. She walks upon this big drop, and she has wings, she can fly, so she just walks off into it. I'm just like, yes, like it just feels so powerful watching her be this person who just kind of owns who she is. And so then she's stumbling around, and she comes across the group of some of these winged beings like her, and she's listening to them talk about how the humans have hunted them down. And there's one, and he's very aggressive, and to the point of, we need to defend ourselves and we need to stand up for ourselves, and it's time for us to take the fight to them. And then we have the one who saved her, which I can never remember his name. He's African American. Looks fabulous. Oh, the diversity. We'll get to that. Looks fabulous, and he's much more of we can try to make peace. We do not have to be violent. We do not have to attack them. We can try to work together. And so we have those opposing forces, and then we have the one who's a bit more aggressive, the blonde. That's what we'll call him. And he is like, well, we have something that we haven't had before. And he's like, we have Maleficent. And she's coming kind of like out from the shadows. And she's like, who are you people? And they're like, we are like you. We are what's left of the dark fae. So I suppose there is the light fae or the good fae. or fairies, who are like the three little ones who were the god fairies for Aurora, and then all the other magical creatures that are in the moors. And then there are the dark fae, who are the much more larger winged beings, who are like, I like to call her Mal, so who are like Mal. They don't have as much magic or powers as she does, but they do seem to have some of them have some magic. And so I guess this is the first time she's ever come across them. So she is very unsure, but she's like, they have wings like me, they can move like me. This one saved me from drowning and dying after being shot with a iron bullet. And so she's trying to kind of take all of this in and trying to understand what this means. And we see that unfolding of the lore related to her and these different dark fae from to still be living in fear. You see the kitty in the back sleeping? Oh, he's being so good. Let's not wake him up. So then he speaks to her about how she has her powers, because Mal is very powerful. She can control the land. She can make things. She can change folks into different animals. She's just very powerful. And he explains that the Dark Fae have originated, they evolved from the original Phoenix. So the Phoenix is the bird who, upon being burned, rose from the ashes, and they are fire burned. They are a symbol of death and rebirth. I always liken the phoenix to the symbol or to the astrological sign of the Sagittarius, because we have Libra who comes through and passes judgment, and then you enter into the gates of the underworld and you are down there, and Libra kind of leads you in, blindfolded, taking you to deal with the things that you need to within the underworld. And we have Scorpio, who then is the god or lord of the underworld, who is just ruling over their space. And so they're deep within that subconscious, deep within that shadow of the things that we try to ignore and to hide within ourselves. And then at some point, you reach the space where you need a little bit of light and a little bit of help to kind of get you through this final part. We have Sagittarius, the season that ends right at the winter solstice, right before we have that shift in the sun coming back and beginning to shift in the energy of the times. And so the Sagittarius is the bird that catches on fire, and it is a flaming bird that is letting the things that you were die, burn away, to be turned into ash and then reborn on that winter solstice, where you rise again as Capricorn and begin to make your ascent out of the underworld and into the land again through rebirth in the spring equinox. So anyways, that's my whole little thing that I see connected to that. And so we have this phoenix. And so it is a symbol of life and death, of rebirth, of transformation, of growth and healing. And we have Mal, who is the last full descendant of the phoenix, and how she then is a person who is able to take life as well as give life. And we see that played out throughout the rest of the movie, as she is able to, after being destroyed, to come back, and how it is through this connection of love that she's able to be reborn, and the power of not so much that one has to find love outside of themselves, but that they form these connections that bring them together and that support them, and that they allow them to be able to be reborn. And I thought that was really powerful. And I mentioned this for briefly in my other review, but what a great time of the year for this movie to be released at that cusp between Libra season and Scorpio season, as we truly head down into, on the 10th, we passed into the second gate, and we moved into getting ready at that energy of the sacral chakra. And so this is the chakra of creativity, of a transformation that comes from energy that is born within us and that grows and is expanded upon and brought outside of us. And then on the 22nd, we entered into the third gate, the solar plexus, the gate of power, the gate of our authenticity and our authority and our ability to be able to kind of say what our needs are and then to be able to stand up for them. And so we see this played out through this movie because she goes from being less authentic, but still wanting to care for others, wanting to be in a family, and she has someone that she cares for and that she has a positive relationship, Aurora, and she wants to be able to lend that wisdom of being the mother. She has not been a maiden for quite some time. Aurora has taken the role of the maiden, and we have Mal, who is at this precipice of the mother and the crone, and she's getting to that point where now it is time for her to transition, another transformation, another passage, another initiation from mother who cares for this being, who cares for someone outside of herself, who is a creature of full creation, to crone, who has such wisdom, but that they're nearing the end of their cycle and to be reborn and to start again at the end of that cycle. And we see her as she accepts that phase of raising Aurora in that state has now transitioned to her still being able to guide her and to watch over her, but from afar as her mother of a young woman who is on her own and sovereign in her own right. Remember, Mal gave the right to be the queen of the Moors to Aurora. And so only someone who held that right in the first place, that ability and power in the first place could pass that on. And although she gave Aurora that identity, that role, and she passed it along, she had not quite fully let go to let Aurora actually be able to lead, which makes sense because Aurora is a little slow. She's a little special. So I was like, yeah, she needs your guidance. She needs your help. But moving from that direct, when you're thinking of raising a child, from these very important formative years, they need you to be right there with them, to protect them and to care for them. And then slowly you have to, like they say, let the bird move out of the nest. And Aurora was moving out of the nest. Literally, she moved from the moors. Figuratively, she was never really in the nest because she couldn't fly, but Mal going through this transformation. And so these themes of how we learn to release and even how we learn to heal from past wounds through shadow work, because one of the issues is that there is this continued story, and we talk about the power of the narrative. There's the one that's the power of the single narrative. It's a YouTube talk. Wonderful author. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. And the power of the single story. And I do not believe that I will say her name correctly. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I believe that's how you say her name. But the danger of a single story. And how we had Mal be twisted into this evil creature. Although she had her evil moments, she didn't stay that way. She saved the princess in the end. It was her true love kiss that awoke Aurora, not Prince Philip's, and yet she was still villainized. So our ability to be able to take these stories that we tell of ourselves, because that's really the shadow work. That's what we really do when we're in the underworld, is we're examining the stories we tell about ourselves and how are we able to rewrite those? How are we able to reconfigure those into a story that allows us some freedom to actually change and to grow? Because if you continue to tell the same story, then you're stagnant. And so at times when we are resistant to changing that story, we go through these very stark, intense transformations, trial by fire, in order to push us into this space of healing and change. In Mal's case, we have her in the first movie she grew and she was encountering this human, and she went through that great betrayal of the loss of her wings, and she lost her power, she lost her ability, her sovereignty, she lost a part of herself that was taken from her, and then she lost her trust in these people, and then he had a child, and that's Aurora, and she's again distant again. Power and a space that was supposed to be for her is, she's trying to take that back, and she's going through negative means to be able to do so. She places the curse upon Aurora. She's trying to get, a semblance of what was taken from her through causing harm to others. And we see that she has to go through this journey of realizing that that's not the best way to approach things. That revenge is not how you find forgiveness for yourself. Not speaking to necessarily forgiveness for others, but to move past these things that have happened to you. And so then we see her, helping to raise Aurora, who she calls Beastie, and helping to thaw her heart, and to build these connections with others around her, and to protect her people, and to realize that her role is larger. These powers that she has, this ability that she has, is larger than the anger and the pain that she feels inside, and that she can harness that to, yes, do great harm, but she can harness that to do great good as well. And making that choice and being okay with shifting back and forth on that gray line in between. And then we find her in the second film, still in that space of a bit of ambivalence, still in that gray zone, and learning to be comfortable in that gray zone, learning to understand that while she has great love for Aurora, she thinks that Prince Philip is a bumbling idiot. She's not half wrong, but she learns that he is more than what she thought that he was. Just like everyone, when they were reduced to these single narratives of the sleeping beauty, of the prince who wakes her with the true love's kiss, of the forgotten parents of Prince Philip, and of the evil witch or the evil fairy godmothers who plants a curse upon the young princess. When we just keep them in these small spheres, then that limits them, and that truly doesn't let you see a person for who they are. Our first impressions, yes, are powerful, but it's just a glimpse of their mask. It's not even seeing really what's down and underneath, and the true authentic self that exists. And so in being put in these crisis situations, the trial by the fire, she is able to see the good in the many people that are around her that she had prejudged. She sees that Prince Philip is really in love with Aurora and is willing to do what he must, not just for Aurora, but for his people, all the people. He doesn't want to have any ill will between the magical folk and the humans. He wants to bring them together, just like his father did. And so that, again, another stark contrast between the king from the first film, who stole from Mal and took from her and took power and authority and her voice, or her ability to truly be who she was through taking of her wings. And this king, Prince Philip's father, who solely was focused on bringing the people, the magical people of the Moors and his kingdom together and making an alliance so that they could live in peace. Again, seeing that there is so much more to the many people, and giving the importance of giving yourself that ability to also see that within you. So going through that process. So as she was again burned, she was defeated, she was laid down low, it was an understanding that her connections also illustrated how important she was, and the need, and her power and her strength, and how that lives on regardless. It's like a legacy. It lives on regardless of her actual physical manifestation. She was no longer whole. She was ashes. ashes to ashes, dust to dust. She was ashes. And yet, through the living waters, the tears of Aurora, we see Maleficent come back. She is reborn, but she is not reborn as the Maleficent that we know. She has a new face. She has a new sense of self. She has been turned into a complete being and a throwback to her own ancestors, to her own lineage of coming from the phoenix. She has arisen now as the phoenix, the bird of fire. She's huge. She can now fully live out her truth of her full story in all of her many pieces of herself as a winged creature, as a magical being, as queen of the Moors, as witch goddess, protector of the Moors and the magical creatures, as the dark fae, as the phoenix, as mother of Aurora, as lover of, at least I believe so. This is me projecting a little on her, but as lover of her, of the raven that stays with her, as lover and protector of her people and the land. you know she's able to embody all of these things in this fierce dark creature that can destroy everything that it touches, and yet uses that not just for destruction but to protect the ones that she cares about the most. And so then we see her kind of fall, and yay, she's come to take over the day, and she has been brought back, and it was a very quick fix. It probably wasn't the best way to write that out. It was a little rushed to get from her being, oh, this is the callback to the dragon from the original film, from the original animated film, but the callback to the dragon. But this recognition that, as Mal said, she would never leave Aurora. She would always watch after her, and that was true, and that she was able to have this transformation and understand that finding peace and finding a way to move forward was much more important than seeking revenge and going the way of destruction, and that through destruction brings new life and new blood and new abilities to create a new story, a more accurate story, to fix the things that have been done poorly before. So there's that part. I also saw the connection between the different reiterations of Sleeping Beauty throughout the folklore and shadow work. I think that'll be a separate film, a second separate live, so that I can get my mind and make sure all of my thoughts stay together for that. But that's a part of that metaphysical witchy reading of Maleficent. And one last note, I was thinking of how there was the magical being who I don't know if he had lost his memories, but he was doing the experiments on the other fairy creatures, and he just didn't understand what was happening. He was too far gone, too far disconnected. Seeing Aurora and seeing what was happening, and having someone, and it was the Raven who's like, what are you doing? You are one of these people, like waking him up. Like, it's kind of like he was the Sleeping Beauty in this film, who was under the spell and under the curse and unable to act upon his own will, and how the needle and the curse is more of a symbol for our ability to have our will taken from us, and how we have to wake back up to be able to take our power back, because while we are still sleeping and under the spell, then we're just not seeing things clearly, and therefore we cannot see ourselves clearly. Also, I was going to say, I just thought of something else and now I have to remember what it is. I loved the Raven. I loved the there. I loved how there's this transformation, this willingness to be able to be what you're needed to be and to change as needed to and to still love and care. Again, another example of that lovely multi-dimensional being and how we are so much more than just this one single piece of ourselves, this one single title. We are just all of these magical things kind of pulled together. Oh, I never talked about this in my other review. So they have these flowers, and the flowers are what grow when they take the fairies who have died and they lay them to rest in this field, and the flowers grow from their forms. And these flowers also have the power to destroy the fairies. When you grind them down, you can use the dust from them to basically it takes a fairy, so like if it was a one of the tree creatures, and it turns them from a magical being who can move and is cognizant and conscious, and it turns it back into a tree, just a regular tree, a tree that does not think or feel. Trees feel, but a tree that does not move autonomously. And so the symbolism behind how the very people who have come before you, so your ancestors, have given you keys to be able to bring joy and peace and life and support to you, or others can utilize them and abuse them to destroy you, and how we have to take ownership and protect what was our culture, our lineages, our ancestors, and the gifts they have given us. And yes, not all ancestors were great. Most of our ancestors have done some awful things, whether it's on a large scale or a small scale, whether it's personality or whether it's, societally, you know, but many of them have given us wonderful, powerful gifts as well. And so understanding that we have to kind of take these gifts and protect them, and then so that they are not weaponized against us, but also the sacredness of the flower, of the light of life, and how through death we are able to live again in different forms and in different ways. And lastly, I think I will end with how I think the saddest part of this film was just the watching the fight between the magical beings and the humans, and how the fear of Queen Ingrid drove her through a fear of lack. It was a fear that was very real, though, a very real experience, that she lost her standing, she lost her societal position because of a lack of resources, of food, of all the things to keep them alive and comfortable, and how she watched across the way in the moors how all the magical beings had more than what they needed, and how they couldn't get that because it wasn't allowed. They weren't supposed to be there. That wasn't for them, and how that created this disharmony within her that turned into this hatred, that turned into this ability to do great violence to beings who were doing their best and just trying to bring peace among the land and to love each other. You know, it was amazing to watch, to kind of see how that festers, and then see how on one side we had Mal, who was able to, because she truly loved and cared for and had not gone too far and had experienced some positive reactions, be able to turn that theory into something to work with, a creative energy, and how that same theory within Queen Ingrid was turned to a destructive energy that was, regardless of who had to be harmed, she was going to get her goals. She was going to get the outcome that she wanted. She was not going to be she was not going to starve again. She was not going to lose her position again, you know. And again, I spoke about the maiden mother crone, the maiden now being Aurora, the mother slash crone. Mal and Queen Ingrid were both on that precipice of moving from mother to crone, and how that transition can be hard. How Aurora was coming in Queen Ingrid's case, she was going to be taking on the role as the queen, soon to be. And then in Mal's case, it was Mal switching from her child being in the nest where she could keep her safe and to losing that control as Aurora grew up and began to have her own life. And so another illustration of that transition and the power of a transition and how we deal with change, how we deal with growth, and how you can, yes, go through awful things and be burned down, but you can rise, or you can turn that outwards, turn that inwards, and just turn it into a very destructive, negative force that will consume you. You know, Mal was consumed in a way where she was able to bring life to others. She saved Aurora many times. Queen Ingrid was consumed in a way that destroyed her and that was not able to be repurposed or transmuted into a new life. I mean, she had a new life, but as a goat. Nobody wants to be a goat. I mean, I guess maybe I'd rather be a cat personally. So now I will stop. Now that will be the end of my Witchy's perspective of the new Maleficent film. She's a wonderful symbol for Scorpio. She's a wonderful symbol for this move into the second and the third gate of the sacral and the solar plexus, of sexuality and power, of the ability to create and the ability to exert power and to claim your own power. Fabulous. So that will be all. I'll see you all later. Have a good night. Bye-bye.